Well, big welcome to Carson Cooper.
You.
Grateful to have you. So yeah, Carson, jumping into it, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story of how you got into coaching. I remember when we sat down for coffee in La Jolla that first day, I was like blown away by all you'd created, and I was like, first of all, how old are you, and when did you start coaching? I was like, so I'd love for you to share some of that with the group.
Yeah, so I got my first coaching certification in 2015, but it actually started before that. So when I came out as a gay male, I had a lot of resentment and anger towards my parents, and a coach was able to coach me. So I was actually working at a school where they would coach the kids. So instead of punishing them or giving them consequences, the teachers would coach them. So as I became a teacher there at 19, it was a private school. So I worked there and created curriculum and supported the project-based learning. So she would teach us coaching principles and we would coach the students. And it changed my life just by doing that. But then coming out, my parents told me that it was the biggest mistake. I was ruining my life. I had dicks and fag written all over my driveway one time coming home. And my dad literally said, you need to go watch all the people dying of AIDS. You need to go to the shock therapy. Like, he said all of those things to me. And so I had this really intense resistance and anger and resentment. And she supported me through everything. And she got me to realize that when I love and accept myself, then I'm going to emanate love and acceptance in the world. And through a couple of years, now me and my parents are best friends, and they support my work. At one point, my partner was living with all of us. So it was a long journey. And then my grandma, actually, when I was little, she would take us on hikes out in the world in nature, and she would just talk about life with me. And so my first business in 2015 was group coaching hikes. So yeah. And I guess the last piece is I did my master's in negotiation, conflict resolution, and peace building. And I taught mediation and conflict resolution for 7 years. Worked with Kaiser, worked with Arlington County government, Sandy County government, worked at the Pentagon, homeless youth, all these different places. But what I realized working with people can have all the information in the world. You can teach them the how-tos, yet if they're not able to shift their inner world and actually be grounded enough to then use the tools, then they're never going to use the best coaching or the best conflict resolution tools. So that's when I actually, in the middle of my master's, was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I am going to coaching. So it was 5 years since I had been coached coming out. And I went and got my first coaching certification. I did finish my master's, but it was begrudgingly.
Yeah, amazing. Wow. It's so exciting to think about a school where instead of punishment, they were utilizing coaching to support students. I mean, what a gift that you got to have that experience. And something for us to consider, how we might be able to bring more of that possibility into the future, into the educational system.
Yeah, my master's on emotional intelligence, and then my professor literally argued and said, you can't teach people emotional intelligence. And I was like, watch me. And
No.
that's what we did with the students. And that's what every single one of us on the line are doing with coaching.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it should be a subject, right? It should be a curriculum, part of the curriculum. And I think I failed at the top of this to mention that our main focus of conversation is going to be about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming and coaching. But before we get to that, I want to ask Carson a couple more sort of more personal questions. So I'd love for you to share what you love about coaching.
So I love, there's so many I teach business, I teach sales. There's so many people out there teaching how to do things. Yet what I believe coaching is getting people to see the power within, getting them to release all of the negative thoughts and emotions, the walls, the cages around their heart. And what's your genius in this world? Every single person has unique genius, and it can be expressed out in the world, yet life puts all these blocks up for us. And so I think coaching is about people owning their personal power, and then owning their unique gifts and then finding that love within themselves. Because once we help people find that love and acceptance within themselves, their outside world will literally change.
Yeah, and I think the name of your company, Genius Unlocked, is such an appropriate name for that model. So how would you describe your coaching superpowers?
Yeah. So my personal mission is to create a vulnerable space for every person to release the most vulnerable judgment of themselves. I mean, we can coach people around money, we can coach people around time, but what is that biggest judgment of yourself that if people knew that you had that inside of you, that you'd be rejected, you wouldn't belong. And so I want to coach people around what is that judgment. And my biggest superpower is like when I'm coaching, I literally see pictures of what they're saying, words, pictures, and I just see this map. And to them, it's this tangled ball of yarn. They're not making enough money. They've had two divorces, they've been to prison, they've had a failed business, and all of it seems separate. And a lot of coaches, and I do, you have to understand and coach them around the separate things, but there comes a point where they've made a story and complex equivalences, that's a neuro-linguistic programming term, that they've made their identity out of all of these things. So what piece of each thing has created their identity? So I love reflecting back to them what they're saying and seeing the patterns of the whole picture. So I really feel like I see patterns and then reflect that back to them and have them go deeper than they have ever been before.
Awesome. Yeah. And I can just share that I've experienced it firsthand and also observed Carson in his genius doing that work. And there is inevitably a moment in Carson's coaching sessions that it's like a, oh, damn moment of just like, wow, that was it, like a gut punch moment. And it's just inspiring to observe and witness you bringing people there, and by bringing them, creating the possibility of them moving past that deepest judgment. So thank you for sharing some of your process of achieving that. So you just mentioned NLP, and I'd like to get more into that. So what is NLP?
So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. And so some of you might have heard of NLP as the language piece. So every president that has somebody that writes their speech, they're neuro-linguistic programming trained in terms of how do you influence people through language. Okay, so that's one aspect of NLP. A lot of people say that's manipulative, and there's a bad rap in NLP. It's like the snake oil, pseudoscience. So to me, NLP is so much bigger than the language piece. So in order to understand NLP, when I'm talking about neuro-linguistic programming, neuro means neurons. So it is from your five senses, you are bringing in information. Your brain is bringing in information, and your body is processing that information. And so how is in the brain, the neurons storing the information? So, and then it's holographic. Holographically, we store information throughout our body. So it's not just in our brain. So as coaches, we can understand how our brain is storing and utilizing the constant information from the five senses. And we actually, in terms of coaching, this is a really important thing, I think, to know, to empower people, is that we have 10 to the 10th to the 10th neurological connections in our brain. That's literally more sand than on all the beaches in the world, or more stars than our eyes can see at night. And so we have the possibility to change. We just need to learn how to understand our neurology better. So then linguistic is, once we have all of that information inside of us, how are we coding that information? So our brain deletes, distorts, and generalizes information through our memories, our values, our personal experiences, our meta programs. And we all have 19 ways that our brain works. And then we create a picture, and then that creates our behavior and our results. So how are we labeling the experiences in life? Through the information, through linguistics. And then the last part is programming. So how is our brain being programmed to then create our identity, to create our behavior, to create our results? And so often we're coaching around just what people want the results are, but we're missing how they're connecting to the neurology, how they're labeling their experiences. And so neurolinguistic programming does all of those three things. And then when I think of neurolinguistic programming, it's about neurolinguistic programming, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy, and neurolinguistic programming coaching. So there's four distinct parts when I talk about neurolinguistic programming.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll get a little deeper into hypnotherapy and timeline therapy and bringing those in with your coaching towards the end of this conversation. But let's start with just a few key concepts from NLP. And I'm a master certified NLP coach through Genius Unlocked. And so I am very familiar with these concepts, but I'd love for Carson to share what they are and how you utilize them in coaching. So let's start with a big one, which is the cause versus effect.
Yeah. So when coaching is all about empowerment, and it's all about understanding our perceptions of the world. And so when somebody is at effect, so that's blaming, shaming, justification. That is victim of circumstance. That is making assumptions about the world, a snap judgment. Or you're making judgments about the world, which is from your limiting beliefs, then you're creating the meaning of your experience. Or you are interpreting. So you're taking your core identity and then you're changing the way that your world is to fit your identity. And so there's all this manipulation going on in the mind that then makes us powerless to our experiences. And or we get stuck. That ego is like righteous. This is the way the world is, and so that's the really effect. And it makes it, we react to the world instead of respond. We're closed off. We're foveal view. So that is just looking at one thing one way. Whereas effect is being able to be expansive. It's opportunity. It's growth. It's creativity. And then you're able to be much more expansive.
And just to be clear, cause.
Yes, cause. Effect is the victim of circumstance, cause is that opportunity. Yeah. And so through neurolinguistic programming, every tool that we use is to help people get to that empowered state and create the life that they want.
Beautiful. Yeah, I like to share that cause, the world is happening for you, effect, the world is happening to you. And what I have really valued in really understanding that concept and then learning how to move people from effect to cause is just that it's a game changer for the effectiveness of coaching. If that is your foundation, if you can start with your client at cause, it just makes the whole process so much more easeful. All right, so moving on to toward versus away.
Yeah, this is mind-blowing to me because we always, as coaches, like a lot of coaches and therapists will focus on the conscious level of what are people's values, what do people want? Yet we deserve to get down to what's truly motivating us from the unconscious mind. So our unconscious mind stores information, and we are actually repressing negative thoughts and emotions in order to function in the world. And then our unconscious mind actually presents the information when it thinks it's time for resolution. Well, the thing is, if we don't then resolve it, it'll push it back down and then it'll come up again. So that's why people have like these negative things that keep happening, or the same relationship, their same money story. They get a job and lose it. They make money and then lose it. So what's happening with towards and away from? So your values are your most unconscious motivators. And when you don't have a need met in life, so people get needs and wants mixed up, but when you don't have a need met in life, you are trying to get that need met from a place of lack. And so we call that away from. And then toward is when you're truly being motivated by having that need met, and it's a positive experience, and you're motivated by positive thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. So let's think about it as money. So money by itself is not a toward or away from. Yet if we want money because we are poor, if we want money to prove ourselves, if we want money because we don't feel safe, that's an away from motivation. That might motivate us to get money, but that's going to be tired. It's going to be exhausting, and it might not even be worth it at the end. Now, again, so then money being toward it's fulfilling, it's exciting, it's part of my purpose and passion. I get to help people. I get to do more with money. That is where long-term success lies. So as coaches, if we can understand where people are coming from away from, clear that up out of the unconscious mind and make all their values toward, it's a game changer for coaching. You no longer have to be an accountability coach, and you start actually being the coach that gets results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a valid point. That without that, the accountability piece is crucial, because the person doesn't really want to do it on an unconscious level. So they just need you to be checking in and bugging them about it. Beautiful. Oh, what about, I love this concept, perception is projection, which is something that we work with in NLP.
Yeah, so I think we've all heard of Carl Jung's philosophy about kind of what's inside of us is projected outside of us, and then what's outside of us is inside of us somewhere. And you don't necessarily have to believe this all out, because I feel like some coaches use perception as a projection as a negative thing or judgment. Yet I want us to all think about, so let's try it on like a jacket. If we did believe that our internal state created our external world, what's the benefit of that? Well, the benefit of that is empowerment. Because whether it's true or not, well, I do believe that science has proved that it is, but regardless, if it's true or not, it's empowering to believe that if I own my internal state, my external world will change. So on the negative side, you have judgments of negative thoughts, negative emotions, and negative behaviors. If you see somebody else doing that, you can't see it, you can't perceive it unless it's inside of you. So we like to think of it as your unconscious mind is like a projector. It's projecting all of those suppressed emotions and experiences so that you can resolve it. So every negative experience in your life is so that you can resolve something in your unconscious mind. That would be so much more empowering if people knew that. Now get this, there's positive projections also. So if you're like, this person is amazing at business, they're such a heartfelt person, they're so sexy, whatever we believe, that is also inside of us. And I believe that our positive projections are the seed to your genius. The positive projections are seed to your genius. So what if we made a list of all the positive projections we had out in the world and then found them in ourselves? We would all be empowered. And then we would know what our purpose is meant to be in this world.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think what's been most valuable for me by taking on this concept is it provides clues to my personal growth. So when I'm finding myself triggered or judging others, it's like, oh, what is that telling me I could work on? Or when I'm having those positive projections, it's like, oh, why am I drawn to that energy? What about me is reflected there? And so, especially for folks who've been doing personal growth work for a while, it's just helpful to have that that intuitive hit through that concept. So I really appreciate that one. Couple others just to hit on. These ones aren't quite as massive, but the first one is chunking up and chunking down. Where do you use that, and what does that mean?
Okay, so I love that. I nerd out about the brain, and I love language. So it's not, I mean, we can ask great questions as coaches, yet what's the language that's going to connect to our client, or what language are they being used? So we teach linguistic presuppositions in NLP, and linguistic presuppositions are how people are labeling their experience in the world. So there's 19 linguistic presuppositions. And in order to get somebody out of a conflict or out of a challenge or problem, there's questions and language to either chunk them up or chunk them down. So chunking them up is chunking them up to the bigger picture. Okay. So when somebody's in overwhelm, they're in overwhelm because they're in too much of the details and they're like, there's so much going on, I'm shutting down. So you can chunk them up to see the bigger picture. And so there's Milton model, which is a term of hypnosis. It's hypnotic language that we could actually use in coaching. So we can make our questions Milton model language to help people chunk them up in order to see the picture and get out of overwhelm or problems or challenges. It's also a negotiation technique. So you chunk people up to agreement. So when you understand how to use the Milton model language, how to use the linguistic presuppositions, you chunk them up to agreement, and then you chunk them back down in order to get to resolution. Mm-hmm. So when I say chunk down, it's about being very specific. So how can you be specific in a way that will then support you in moving forward? But with some people, we chunk them down as coaches. Well, they could be a global person, a global thinker. And so we're actually chunking them down and it's not going to serve them. Or if we love bigger picture and we chunk them up, they could be a details person. And then we're putting them in overwhelm as coaches. So I think it's really important for us to know that.
Yeah, that structure has really supported me in my question asking. It helped me be a lot more intentional about my questioning. And what about distortions and deletions?
Yes. Okay. So everyone is deleting, distorting, or generalizing information. So I love saying this, and coaches are like, what? It's like, don't believe the client. Okay. So we don't believe the client because they're deleting, distorting, and generalizing information, right? So we all know that somebody has a belief about the relationship, but then if you talk to the other person, there's a completely different story, which is why we don't believe the client. So now there's questions in order to regain the deleted information, to regain the generalized information, so that you can get the bigger picture and not be bought into their story. Because as soon as we get bought into their story as a coach, then we've lost our effectiveness.
Yeah, and we've validated their story, and so then there's further stuck in it. Right. Awesome. So let's move on to some conversation around subconscious versus unconscious work. And you've already started alluding to it, but let's go a little deeper. So share how that applies to this conversation so far, subconscious versus conscious level work.
Yeah. So the conscious mind, we do a lot of conscious reframing. So content and context reframing. Old thought, old emotion, old belief, new thought, new emotion, new belief, cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's a lot of what we've all learned in our coaching certifications. And so the unconscious mind that neurolinguistic programming, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy, and energy bring is that we're understanding the unconscious mind. So there's 21 prime directives of the unconscious mind, but 6 of them are what can really help us as coaches. So in your unconscious mind, you organize your memories, you store your memories. Like I said, you repress those memories until there's resolution. Then it presents it for resolution. And then it helps run the body. So the unconscious mind, when we're working with coaches on the conscious level, we can reframe. Yet if that'll get short-term results, but if we're always just reframing stuff, we are not actually dealing with the stored negative emotion in the unconscious mind. Then if you're just doing energy work and hypnotherapy, that's working at the complete unconscious level. Well, it works. It's amazing. Yet, get this, your conscious mind might not believe it. So you reinstall it or don't believe the healing. Mm-hmm. So what we do with neurolinguistic programming and timeline therapy is you're actually building trust between the conscious and unconscious mind so that your conscious mind believes the healing at the unconscious level, and then you can have long-term sustainable results.
Yeah, it's pretty epic. And I got to say, I went through the introductory training, the NLP prac, it's called. And I was a little skeptical because I was creating a lot of success with my clients through conscious level coaching, through ICF work. And I actually didn't utilize the NLP stuff for a while. And then I was like, I need to give this another shot. So I went to the master practitioner training, and then I saw its effectiveness for myself and for the client I worked with. And then I have been utilizing it ever since. And it's been a total game changer. What I see in its effectiveness is it's much more efficient when I'm utilizing both the conscious level work and the unconscious level work. That it's efficient. The transformation happens faster and it's more sustainable as well. And so I love having those tools working in tandem. So I would love for you to share, you mentioned timeline therapy, and I'd love for you to share just a little bit more about that concept and how that applies.
So timeline therapy is taking, so it's a combination of all the psychology, all of the studies from psychology from the early 1900s, all the way up to 1984 is when timeline therapy was created. And it's bringing in the quantum physics of the brain. So how can you break the neurological connections and create new ones faster? And that's by understanding the quantum physics of the brain. And so timeline therapy is actually being able to reframe the brain so that it can see the positive. Then it's understanding what's the illusion that we're creating in our unconscious mind so that we can break that illusion. So there's really only one emotion that's a true emotion, is love. And everything else is a derivative of fear. Well, fear is an illusion, because fear is what our unconscious mind has created to keep our body safe. That's a prime directive of the unconscious mind, is to keep our body safe. And so if the only reason of fear is to keep us safe, then we can see the illusion of safety, create safety for ourselves, and then be able to move forward. And then the last piece of timeline therapy so it's a mirror image reverse in our brain. So you actually put the person in a specific position in their brain, and it breaks the neurological connection because it's the mirror image reverse. And so what you're doing is you're also going back before a trauma or before an event that happened, they didn't have that belief system. So they can get back to that. And so timeline therapy helps you get back to that.
Yeah, I always love to consider the idea that you created that disempowering belief in an instant, or you took on that negative emotion in your body in an instant, and in the same way it can be transformed in an instant. And that sort of speaks back to that efficiency piece that I was commenting on.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of us as coaches, we've heard of limiting beliefs. And so in neurolinguistic programming, we're actually dealing with limiting decisions. So before every belief, a decision preceded the belief. So I made a decision that being gay is bad. And then I created a belief that nobody will hire me, that I can't come out to my parents, that I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy. So as coaches, we can focus on all these beliefs, but if we don't get to this root decision, we're not going to change our clients can't change their life. So it's really about coaching to that limiting decision and then using the timeline therapy, hypnotherapy, NLP to be able to get rid of that decision.
The other thing that I love about that is a decision there's something very active about it. I decide this. And in the same way that you can decide this, you can decide something else. And so the work can support them in creating a new decision, having a choice in that matter.
Which is empowering, which I love.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love you to share any stories that you have about using NLP in coaching.
Yeah, so one of the, with ICF, I mean, I love ICF. I have over like 6 certifications in different organizations that were ICF certified because I love that. That was my foundation of coaching. And the one thing that I was like, oh, I wish I could work with people with trauma. And so NLP, Timeline Therapy, and Neurolinguistic Programming allows you to work with people with trauma. So I worked with a lady that her whole family but her died in a car accident. So her husband and 2 kids died in a car accident about 20 years ago. And her whole leg swelled up and she had rashes because her unconscious mind was suppressing the trauma, and so that she could function in life. And so she went to doctors, therapy, all of this stuff, and the body was storing the trauma. And so when we did a breakthrough session using neurolinguistic programming, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy, we were able to release the trauma of that event. And her legs actually went down, the swelling went away, and she went from not making any money, not having any real relationship. She had never dated till after that point. And then after a 10-hour breakthrough, she started dating again. She was building a business. And so that's the power of neurolinguistic programming. And then also, I worked with a guy that he had went to prison for several years, and he felt like he created so much collateral damage in his life. And he actually he had stuff around his parents, around his money, around, he was mentoring this girl, and then she passed away when he was in prison. There was all of this guilt. And so he again went to therapy, went to different things, and he consciously reframed. He consciously was like, this was a positive experience. I'm this person, I'm stronger because of it. Well, that's a conscious reframe. In the end, he unconsciously didn't believe that he was lovable, that he was hurt and he hurt other people and he deserved to punish himself. And so the conscious reframe of coaching wasn't enough. And then when he was able to release that, he then realized that he is deserving of love. And he was able to change his relationship with his parents, build his business, and transform that.
And then I love that story. And circling back to the first one, you might have mentioned this and I missed it, but what happened with her leg? The woman who had the swollen car accident.
Yeah. So the swelling in her leg went down within a week, and the rash went away. Wow. After 20 years of it being swollen and rashed. And so our body stores this, and the motion can be released.
Yeah, that story is so inspiring. And I worked with a client recently using timeline therapy who had some major physical ailments. And I was kind of terrified. I was like, this guy really wants those things to go away. Is this work going to actually have that effect? And I had remembered that story, and I was like, I'm just going to go for it. And I knew that that's what he wanted. And I didn't go and promise him it, but I was hoping it would have that impact. And sure enough, it shifted him physically in a very short amount of time. And so it's really exciting, because those are those moments where it's hard to question it, when you have the proof within your body.
I think I did so many breakthroughs before I believed it. I'm just like I've helped people with like chronic back pain, chronic shoulder pain. My brother couldn't sleep because of back pain for 3 years. And then in one session, he was able to sleep, and I'm like, is this really working?
That makes me feel better, Carson. I felt like I was the biggest cynic. And, like Nathan and I would be driving home from a prac, and I'd be like, yeah, does this shit really work? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to stick with it. I know. And now, I'm so grateful that I've started to really use these tools. Wonderful. We have a few more minutes before we step into the Q&A. And I just want to bring up laser focus coaching, because it's another one of those superpowers of yours. I'd love for you to share what that is and any tips you have around that.
Yeah. So so we're actually rebranding it Root Cause Coaching. And so I'll tell you why. So the root cause coaching, and what I want to scream from the mountaintops and have every coach know, is that there is presenting problems, greater problems, and root causes. So most coaches can coach well and do coach the presenting problem. Some coaches coach the greater problem. And I feel like very few coaches are getting down to the true root cause. And so the root cause coaching, the laser focused coaching helps us understand what is a presenting problem. I don't have enough time. I don't have money. My boyfriend's a dick, whatever it is. Then that is usually when you're dealing with a presenting problem, it's in one area of life, and they don't see how it's affecting other areas. And so they can get stuck in, this isn't changing. Then the greater problem is negative thoughts and emotions that are usually cross-contextualized in their patterns. So, okay, this is happening in this area of life. It's also happening in this area of life. It's also happening in this area of life. And again, if you can see the pattern, then you can start making change. Yet a root cause is, and usually presenting problems and greater problems, people want something. So then you coach them down to why they don't have it. And then that's usually a presenting problem or greater problem. The root cause is a need that they're not getting met. And it's part of their identity. It's part of how they see the world. It's part of their truths. But it's a small true. It's a small t, small for truth. And it's the small ego. The ego is trying to hold on to something. And they've created all these beliefs as rules to make it true because we want to be right in this world. It makes us feel safe. And so when you get down to the root cause and you actually blow that out of the neurology, then they don't believe it anymore. That's how you change the outer world, because their identity shifts, their perceptions shift, their personality and characteristics that aren't serving them anymore shift. And so it's about getting down to understanding the presenting, understanding the greater, and then getting the true need met. And then you create goals. When you create goals on the other side, you don't want to create goals for what you want unless it's satisfying your needs. Because your conscious mind is the goal setter, but your unconscious mind is the goal getter. Your unconscious mind will not go get goals unless your needs are satisfied. And so it's a process of unlearning, getting to the root cause, shifting, getting the need met, and then creating behaviors that are actually going to get your needs met and create what you want.
Yeah, and I understand that it's a full process that requires, some teaching, but I'm just curious if you have any, little tips that you might offer before we jump into Q&A. For folks to utilize some of this in their coaching today?
Yeah. So I actually use very basic questions. So I think coaches, their questions can be very convoluted. And in terms of to drill down into the unconscious mind, repetition can be good. And again, not believing the client. So when they're saying stuff, so if they say a thought, I don't believe I'm smart. Okay, when you think you're not smart, what do you feel? So it's kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy. So when you think that, what do you feel? Oh, I'm unwanted. That's still a thought. So when you think you're unwanted, what do you feel? Rejected. That's still a thought. So when you think that, what do you feel? So really making sure that you get the thought and then get to a true feeling, because that's going to drill them down to more into the unconscious mind. And then when you think that, when you feel that, what do you do? Now, a lot of coaches that I've mentored stop there. It's like, okay, cognitive behavioral therapy or reframing or whatever we've learned in all of our different coaching. But then you actually keep drilling and say, okay, so when you think that, feel that, and do that, what does that represent? What are the negative thoughts and emotions because of that? And then you actually go 5 to 7 layers deep. And you do that until you get to, and they're gonna say there's nothing else. There's nothing else. Well, that's your critical faculty between your conscious and your unconscious mind. Their critical faculty is stopping them. And the critical faculty is super thin when we're younger, which is why children have such big imaginations. And so as coaches, we have to understand that the critical faculty grows. Every negative experience we have, every bad thing that happens to us, our critical faculty gets thicker, and then we can't suspend disbelief into imagination. And so the root cause coaching, you're drilling past that critical faculty using Milton model language, using the hypnotic language, drilling them down and getting them down to that root cause, which is usually earlier in life, a belief, a decision that they made earlier in life that they're still not getting met. So perception is projection. They're projecting it out right now because they made a decision. You find that root decision, and then you see how they could get the need met. So how back then could they have gotten the need met? I know as coaches, you don't stay there. The content doesn't matter. It's the decision that matters. Then coach them around getting that need met. How would they have done it then? And then how can they do it now? And then that is what's going to create lasting transformation. And it's so much deeper because we can coach all day long, but then your clients, if you're dealing with the presenting problem or greater problem, the clients will keep coming back with the same patterns until you get down to the root cause.
Yeah. And sometimes I find that they already have those needs met and they're just not present to it, and that supporting them and identifying those needs, they suddenly are like, wait, I don't need to keep operating as if I don't have those needs met anymore. Right. And they can shift their neurology just in that aha moment.
Yeah.
Cool. Such juicy stuff. I like geeking out with you on this stuff too. And now I would love to bring in the rest of the group to ask any questions. So I'm going to remove our spotlight so that we can go back to gallery mode, which requires you all to go up to your upper right cursor and hit gallery, because right now it's defaulting to speaker. So you should be able to go to your upper right. Give me some thumbs up if you're back into the gallery. Awesome. So now is an opportunity for folks to ask Carson some questions. I imagine some of your curiosity might be piqued from the slew of exciting information that he just shared with us. Yeah, so who would like to ask a question? Yeah, go for it, Jerry.
Yeah. So, I mean, it obviously takes a long time to learn all of what you have. You didn't do it overnight. But what would be a good resource or just kind of a direction to bring in for people that are looking at trying to understand this a little bit better, that can kind of get a simple idea of how to make it work, or at least start on that path?
Yeah. So there's Timeline Therapy by Tad James. He has a book. It's just called Timeline Therapy. That's an amazing place to start. And then that would be the first place to start.
Okay.
If you want to learn more about timeline therapy. And then in that book, he suggests hypnotherapy books, but I would definitely start there. So yeah. And then, so we actually have a 7-day course that we do, and then you actually get the 4 certifications. And then you can learn how to do all of this actually. So yeah.
Thank you. What other questions?
Hi, Carson, it's really fascinating. Thank you for doing it. And what are those 3 things again? You said deleting, destroying, and what was the other one?
Deleting, distorting, and generalizing.
Oh, distorting. Would you just go over that again?
Yeah. So let's use the famous, I want him to want to do the dishes. Okay. So that's, what's that movie? I want him to want to do the dishes. And so when our partner's not doing the dishes, so we're just deleting information. Okay. And we're just then making assumptions like they never do the dishes. They don't care. We're just making broad generalizations. So they're literally deleting information. They've done it a ton. Just they're in the middle of their masters and they're not doing it now, right? So they're deleting information. And so then they go to distortion. So they're not doing it because they're lazy. So they're distorting the information, and they're just saying, oh, they don't do it because of this. And then generalizing, then they're actually saying, well, they're not doing it because they love me. They don't love me. They're doing it because they want to end the relationship. So they're generalizing on what the information means. And so there's different ways so a deletion is also a complex equivalent. Okay. So I went to prison, so I'm a bad person. Okay. So that's what that guy said. My family died, so I will never have love again. So they're creating complex equivalents. Well, they're deleting, distorting, and generalizing information. And so you ask how specifically, you ask different questions to regain the deletion, distortion, and generalization.
Well, the example of the the slob is a really good one. So if I am the slob and you're the coach, what are you going to ask me?
Well, I would ask what benefit do you get out of being a slob? Because it could be serving you actually.
Yeah, he does all the work then.
Yeah. Yeah. He does all the work. So when he does all the work, what's important about that?
Well, I can take it easy and I don't have to bother about this. I like to do other things, Carson.
Yeah.
Other things are more important to me than cleaning up my underwear on the floor.
So what does cleaning up represent to you?
Being my mother.
Being your mother?
Yeah.
So when you think about your mother, what are the negative thoughts and emotions that come up?
No, that she picked up after me. That was good.
Oh, that was a good thing.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. So you want somebody to pick up after you and you want to have your mother? Okay.
Yeah.
So how if at all does your relationship affect your mother?
Oh, so that's a good question. I'm making this up, so I'm not the slob, but I have this conversation with a lot of couples, not even coaching them. They just talk about it. When they come here, they say he's a slob and he won't pick up after himself. And it's always a power thing. Yeah. One is trying to get the other to stop.
Beautiful. So the presenting problem was the slob. The greater problem was what you just said, is the power struggle. The root cause there is that one of them is not feeling loved. One of them is not feeling connected and cared with, that doesn't care about me. Well, that's not the first time that person's felt that. They felt there's patterns in their life that they felt. So the dishes or the slobbery is connected to a root cause that's cross-contextualized and a need isn't getting met.
Yes, I have this experience with straight men. For example, a man gets married and he makes a decision. He hates to go to the hospital because he doesn't like how he feels, but he doesn't know that. He just says, I'm not going to the hospital. And she says, honey, let's go to the hospital. It's your cousin. And he says, I'm not going. And they have a fight. And she screams, it's your cousin, not mine. And he doesn't go. And they have a fight. And then there's another fight and then another fight. And there's one last fight where he gets away with it. And everybody says, oh, don't bother Joe. He never goes to the hospital. So Joe is free of feeling this. The same thing for funerals.
Yeah. So, I mean, as coaches, we all know that there's something he has attached to going to the hospital. There's some negative thoughts, emotions, trauma. And so they're fighting over the presenting problem of him going. It could be anybody, it could be her, but he's still going to have that triggered trauma of going to the hospital.
Yeah. And gay men are usually easier we know how to do this.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This is really thought-provoking. And I love it that you and Wil are a tag team here.
Yes.
The same thing. Yeah.
And we also have Nathan Serrato is part of our team now too. And we got pulled together through GCA as well. And Brian is coming to study with all of us soon too. So yeah, GCA and some Genius Unlocked harmony is happening in a good way.
Brian, I'd love to hear like what's one thing you've gotten out of so far, if you don't mind putting it on the spot.
You're on mute, Brian.
There's a journal full. Well, it's not full yet, but it's full.
You're still on mute, or you're on mute again. There you go.
The journal's not full yet, but it is filling up. I think the most powerful thing for me so far has been the experience of timeline therapy. I did my first breakthrough with Nathan a couple of weeks ago, and it was you talk, Wil, about those aha moments. It was like, whoa.
Cool.
Yeah, Nathan's our in-house coach for Genius Unlocked. So yeah, we love Nathan.
As a coach, we always have this conversation. What's the difference between coaching and therapy. And how do you get around that with timeline therapy? Are you a therapist or are you a coach?
Yeah, so it's kind of stupid. The only reason that they named it timeline therapy is because in 1984, therapy was the thing. And now they would not have named it therapy now, because it's not your traditional type of therapy. As in coaching, so ICF, you don't go back and you don't coach around the content of a past event, right? So that's therapy, is you're going and looking at the trauma and the content of the trauma. So timeline therapy is a dissociated process. So when we're coaching, there's associated and dissociated. So associated is they're in their body, they're feeling their emotions. So, and then dissociated is they're disconnected from their body, they're disconnected from the problem. So when there's problems with both, if you're overly associated, then you're crying. I worked with somebody and it was like he just had the divorce. He hated her. And it was 20 years ago. And I was like, oh, damn. I thought it was yesterday. And so he's overly associated. Then you work with people that are dissociated and they're just like, oh, I guess that happened. It didn't affect me. It's like your brother got shot in the face. You're all free from that. There's no way you saw that. And it's like, oh, yeah, I hated him anyways. I'm glad he deserved it. It's like, yeah, no, you're overly dissociated, right? So we want as coaches them to be associated enough, but dissociated enough to get the learnings. So timeline therapy is a dissociated process. They don't have to relive it over and over. You get the learnings from the event, and then you release the negative thoughts and emotions, and the content doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Great question, Harry.
I have two guests here, Arthur and Win, and I wonder if they have any questions. I'm putting you on the spot deliberately, but that's okay. You guys are very, very bright, questioning guys. Come on. No.
I was just enjoying taking it all in and taking a lot of notes and figuring that the internet would help me if I needed to look some of this stuff up. So I really appreciate the content, Carson.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, one of the, this is very prevalent, I think, in the gay community as well. I've worked with a lot of people that are addicted to meth, which is a big drug and sex and different things. And they don't want to be anymore, but they're so identified with that. And they believe that it's the only way that they can have fulfilling sex. It's the only way that they can connect with people. And so I've worked with several people and helped them with timeline therapy and neurolinguistic programming get off of meth. And really get their needs met. And it's so interesting because some of it is trauma. Like some people have massive trauma. Like I worked with somebody that his best friend, his partner, and all these people died in the AIDS epidemic. Then he got excommunicated from the Mormon church. Then his parents left him. Then his brother got shot in the face, point blank, and he saw it. Then he lost his bigwig job. So now you have all of these traumas that are back to back. So we had to go in and release every trauma with timeline therapy. And so then his addiction and different things shifted. Yet one guy, it's like his root cause was when he was little, he peed in the pool, and that created so much embarrassment that's when he started being a rebel and doing all of this different stuff. And he had asthma, and it tied into like, it's not just ever one thing, right? But he had asthma, and then the embarrassment there met the embarrassment of the asthma, and then him thinking he wasn't a man. And then that led to his family were farmers and he was out in the field, but the dust would kill him. So it was just like all these linked together that then made him not feel good enough. And so we went and found all of those root causes. And we think something like being embarrassed and pee in the pool. Trauma is when somebody's in a heightened emotional state and an event happens, our brain connects it neurologically. So anything could be trauma to anybody. We can't judge. And I know as coaches, none of us do. But that getting down to their neurological connection that created the trauma for them and then fulfilling their needs, that's what we talk about in timeline therapy and NLP in order to even help people be released from addiction.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's give Carson Cooper a round of applause.
Thank you so much. That was really fun.
So fun. So Alan just put in the chat the next conference, the next session, which is on 11/11, an easy date to remember. So we hope to see you all there. I would love, we've got 3 minutes. I would love people to just put in the chat a word that they're sitting with, you know, a word that sort of encapsulates what they're taking away from this call, perhaps, or what emotion you might be experiencing right now. But just throw in the chat a word. And then we'll we got gratitude for this community, wonderful win, inspired by Kirk, great new info from Harry, breakthrough and release from Jerry, love it, towards Alan, curiosity, Ralph, tools from Arthur, amazing, inspiration to look at more tools, wonderful, Dean. And Carson, why don't you throw the Genius Unlocked website in that chat too? Yeah, there's your email, perfect. And then folks can also have the website for Genius Unlocked to check out, or they can reach out to you. Well, thank you again all so much for coming. It was really wonderful to see all of you and to welcome some new faces to this group. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys in November. Much love to everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you, Win. Come back.